Hi, Antonia. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for being my guest. Can you please tell me just a little bit about yourself? How did you find yourself in the world of virtual reality?
Yeah, sure. So my title now is I'm an XR technical specialist for industry at Unity Technologies. So for anyone out there who's tried making games, you've probably heard of Unity. It's like a 3D physics and development environment that you can use to make games, but you can also use to make a load of different things. So my focus is on XR. XR stands for extended realities, and it's like a big term that covers VR, so virtual reality, and AR or augmented reality. So my focus is to understand those technologies and how they're affecting industry. So everything from architecture to automotive, making cars, to transport, like train lines, manufacture, like production lines in factories, to engineering, aerospace, making planes, and construction, also film and entertainment and media as well. All of those different industries use XR in different ways. So my job is to kind of communicate with them, understand their needs, help them with the software, and also to make demos and do lots of public speaking. My background was very different though. I don't have a computer science degree. I'm actually self-taught as a programmer. I just learned using YouTube and Udemy and the internet. Yeah, so really if I can do it, anyone can. Before that, I was doing science communication, which is quite actually similar to what I'm doing now because it's a combination of doing shows and demonstrations. So that was more like chemistry and biology demonstrations and communicating quite complex things in a more simple way.
Wow, that's quite a background. So can you please tell me, our topic is virtual reality, what is it and how does it work?
Sure, so virtual reality, here we go, I'm actually going to dig one out. This is totally not scripted because I didn't know if this was here, but it is. This is an example of like a virtual reality headset. When you put it on, there's two screens and you're inside a virtual world. So when you look around and when you move around, you're totally inside a world where you can't see the real world at all. But everything you interact with is virtual. That's the key thing. Augmented reality is quite different. And that's the kind of thing you might get on your phone, for example, where you can see the real world and then you can see something virtual on top of it. So like Pokemon Go or like a face filter. That's a common example people know. But you also get augmented reality headsets where they're actually like a VR headset, but they're see-through. So you can see the world and then you can also see virtual things on top.
So I definitely have experienced VR. I have like a PlayStation VR, for games, obviously. My brother has an Oculus. It's so immersive to me. It truly is. So that's why I can't play scary games on that. My brain is absolutely convinced it's happening. What makes it so immersive?
That's a very good question. Also, I want to say that I've had that experience too. For me, if I play horror in VR, I try to cover my eyes, but I can't. So I just kind of smack myself in the face. You're not alone. So I think the reason it's so immersive is that you have what's called 6DoF or 6 degrees of freedom. And what we mean by that is you can look in 3 dimensions. So you can look left, right, up, down, or you can also tilt your head and that changes your vision. So in technical terms, it's roll, pitch, and yaw is the different ways you can move your head. And you can also move your body in those 6 ways as well. You can go left, right, you can go forward, backward, and you can stand up and sit down. And so in virtual reality, when you do any of those things, the world moves with you. And so it tricks your brain into thinking that what you're seeing and interacting with, because it's matching the signals that your body's getting, it must be real. And that's one of the reasons it feels so immersive. There's also other things. So the fact that it's 3D is obviously really important. That wouldn't really work to be immersive otherwise. The way that we make it look 3D, or the technology makes it look 3D, because I don't have to personally do it, it's kind of inbuilt. It's something called parallax. And what that means is if you hold your finger in front of you and you look with just one eye and then you look with the other eye, you'll see that it's actually 2 different images. And it's also how 3D glasses work, because they're either polarized or sometimes they have a battery and they go on and off, on and off. And your eyes see 2 different images. That's the same in VR. There's 2 screens basically showing one eye one thing and one eye the other thing. And so your brain can determine the distance, or it thinks it can, and that's why it looks 3D.
Are you at all involved also with glove development where you can actually feel like you're touching something?
Yeah, no, that definitely exists. So there are things like gloves, wearables, chairs, whole suits that can vibrate to kind of give you the sense that you're really in a world. There's also ways to do it where you don't have to wear or touch anything at all. So I used to work for a company called Ultraleap, and they create ultrasonic arrays, a system or a set of lots of different transducers, and they project out ultrasound, which is sound that's so high pitched that we can't hear it. If you do that at exactly the right timing, you can get it so that all the ultrasound adds up in one single point in space and time, and it has what's called constructive interference. So the strength of all the waves adds up, and it's so strong that you can actually feel it. If you do that, you can feel not just a dot, but you can feel shapes. So if you had a sphere, it sort of feels like a shape that's made of air, or like a ghost shape.
That exists already?
Yeah, that exists. I used to work with that. If you imagine like a checkout at a supermarket, it would be much better if we didn't have to physically press, we didn't have to touch anything. So one of the things I was working on is screens that it looks like a normal touch screen, but you just press away from the screen, maybe 10 centimeters, and you get that feedback and you feel the button, even though you haven't touched anything at all, which is much safer in terms of the hygiene.
This is why I like sci-fi. It's my favorite genre because half of the things you see end up actually happening in your lifetime. It's amazing. One of my favorite movies is The Fifth Element, and there's a little round robot there. Now I have that. It's cleaning my house.
Exactly. That's why my hair is orange. It's The Fifth Element. Lily was a slight inspiration.
Actually, I was going to ask you something real quick with VR. So I love it. I want to play it. One of the things that stops me, I'm one of those people who get motion sickness.
Yeah, the reason we get motion sickness is our visual signals don't match the signals that our body is experiencing. So if you read in a car, you might get a similar thing because your book isn't moving very much. So your visual stimulus is quite still, but your body's moving a lot. And so your body thinks you've been poisoned and you start feeling nauseous. That's one of the theories of why we think that happens. So in VR, it can happen if there's a bad sync between your body and your visual stimulus. If you turn one way and your headset doesn't turn as fast as you, or it turns a different angle, then you're probably going to feel a bit sick. Okay. Nowadays, it's much less of a problem, I think, because the graphics are much better, the timing is much better, there's less lag. But there were ways to combat it if you put a dot in the middle of someone's vision as an anchor, and that always follows their headset. That gives them like a sense of stability. It makes them feel less nauseous.
Interesting. Yeah, I've read even about adding a nose. So having a feeling as if you're seeing your nose in VR can help. I guess it's the same idea, some sort of an anchor.
Yes.
Can I ask you, what are some of the most exciting ways you can imagine VR, AR, XR being used?
It's hard to say in the far future because all of the things I think are crazy and wild, some of them are already true, and some of them I think are going to be true in like a year or 5 years. So particularly for AR, what I think will happen is we'll see less focus on mobile devices like iPads and more focus on wearables. So we already have AR headsets like the HoloLens or the HoloLens 2, but I think what will happen, especially in the next 2 to 5 years, is we're going to get much smaller and much more stylish looking wearable AR. So what I mean by that is like glasses that you can see through, but also have information. So if you imagine like you could read a sign in another language and it would just have an option that you could pinch in front of you and it would turn into English. It would be so useful. And I think with VR, for me, the most exciting thing is having such realistic VR that we can kind of blend the real and the virtual. The reason XR is for me a great term is that right now there's this clear distinction between VR where there's nothing real and AR where it's mostly real with a very small thing on top. And I think we're going to see more blurring of that boundary. So you can very easily, with technology, you can make a wall change color or make a door where there isn't a door or hide a door where there is a door. I'm very interested in storytelling and immersive worlds and fantasy and fairy tales. So I think that really opens up the possibility for some very exciting games and locations and like theme parks.
And very exciting and terrifying new horror games. In my mind.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You know what I think about? Because I never really thought about health much with VR. And then I realized there's a couple of places that do VR exposure therapy. They combine therapy with virtual reality in case somebody has phobias or certain anxieties. So if someone's terrified of flying, you know, it's kind of hard to get them on the plane and do it there. You can do it in virtual reality.
Yeah, it's being used for all kinds of medical reduction of anxiety in other ways as well. So I've seen studies where VR has reduced perception of pain. So people who are bedbound, have some kind of either chronic pain or chronic illness, VR can actually bring relief to those people because it can put you in a very soothing experience like swimming with dolphins. And in terms of training people as well, VR is a very immersive way for everything from like pilots to surgeons to people operating heavy machinery. It's a much safer and cheaper and less dangerous way of people learning those sorts of things.
Oh, one of my favorite games. It's a bit in the future and people are using this kind of VR sets to actually control really dangerous machinery in environments where you wouldn't want to be personally. Also in that world, the artificial intelligence steals people's brain scans through VR.
That's interesting. So I've just joined the IEEE, which is an initiative for ethics in XR group, and they talk about ethical considerations when developing XR because it is really changing someone's conscious experience. And there's also the consideration of biometric data. If you're doing things like eye tracking and seeing where someone looks, you can kind of elicit things like their attention, what draws their attention. And so it's really important that XR is developed in an ethical way, that we don't, for example, store lots of data data for a long time, or allow that to be leaked to someone that it could be harmful, or that it doesn't affect someone's like access to healthcare.
That's great. I'm gonna get to my final question. What would you love to learn more about?
Quantum computing. I mean, quantum physics, I've heard that if you think you understand it, you don't understand it. So maybe it's not possible, but it'd be really interesting to see like a short format on what does that mean? What is it?
Yes.
Why is it like that?
Perfect. My second video, my guest also asked for that. I have to.
Okay.
Antonia, thank you so much for your time. I can't wait to watch all your videos.
You'll find everything from bees to LGBT.
It'll take me a while, right? Have a great rest of your weekend.
Thanks, you too.